Thank you. I'm calling this session of the Board of Revision to order and acknowledge that we are in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Innu, Cree, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 41st Nation and Treaty 3 territory. My name is Harvey Diamond. With me today are Bill Moretsky and Cynthia Stevens. The City Assessment Department is represented by Clayton Diachin, and our administrator is Zachary Moen. We'll be hearing applications for revision of the assessment rules in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision are requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made after this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised, the comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered as evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it as well as the City Administration. It makes a decision based on the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the Board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or to classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to an application for exemption from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on do so will be included with the Board's order. We expect the hearing process will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the session that's be followed by any questions the applicant may have, and then the applicant has to be followed by any questions. And each side will give an opportunity to summarize if they wish to do so. Once all of the evidence upon an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all applications have been heard, and the Board will deliver in private to make its decisions. You receive the Board's order by written mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will form part of a public record. And today we have items 1 and 2 on the docket. And Mr. Moen, you can please affirm the assessor and the applicant's testimony at this time.
Of course, Mr. Chair. Mr. Assessor, please state your full name.
Clayton Diachin.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Mr. Applicant, please state your full name.
Rocky Neufeld.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
And I just received your documents. Thank you.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, so ready to proceed then. Well, we first have item 1 on the docket, which is the property that's located at 603 St. Mary's Road. And the points of appeal on this one are as well as assessed value, classification, and liability. Is that correct, Mr. Neufeld?
Yes, that is. We haven't. I think when we filed the appeals, we were concerned about any sort of changes. So I don't think we're going to be pursuing the class and liability on that. It was, but I don't have directions yet from council. So perhaps if rather than withdraw, we'll allow the board to make a ruling on that. But we have no issues. I have no issues right now.
Well, if you're not going to present evidence, you know, I don't know if it matters if you withdraw it or we make a ruling, because there's no evidence we're going to.
Yeah, no, exactly. We're not going to waste our time on it. It's just a question of whether or not legal counsel wants to consider any issue down the road. I don't foresee it, but.
Okay, we'll make a ruling on it then, Mr. Neufeld.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, and is all evidence on this matter been filed on a timely basis? I'm going to ask Mr. Moen if everything is, all the evidence before us is filed in its time allotment.
Unfortunately, no. Both entries here I have were late submissions.
By
By
the
applicant.
By the applicant.
Yeah.
Okay, so Mr. Neufeld, we're going to have to consider whether we're going to allow your evidence then if it wasn't filed within the time span required. So we're going to have to go on camera and make that decision.
I see. Is there a date that they were noted as being received?
From our records here, we received them on Monday, September 9th at 5:30 PM.
Sorry, Monday,
September 9th, 5:30 PM.
September 9th?
Correct, yes.
That doesn't sound late to me.
Because these items were adjourned from a prior hearing, so I believe that, yes. Let me see, what's your receipt? 9th. Yeah, so the due date was the 9th, but they were supposed to be submitted before 4:30, if I'm understanding the situation correctly.
Oh, okay. So and your notification of receipt was what time?
5:30.
5:30. Okay, so an hour late. And for now, did we know at the time that these were going to be adjourned?
I'd have to look into that.
Okay. I wasn't handling this, so I guess that's why I missed this finding the evidence from the assessor. I believe I'd have to recheck my notices. Okay, so 1 hour late. Thank you. That's what I wanted to see here. I'm sorry. Were they received separately or combined?
One more moment, please. They were,
Pardon me?
they were received together, both files at the same time.
Oh, like on the same email?
Same email, correct?
Okay. We've had some issues with the city server not receiving our file sizes, so I don't know if you have any record of that. That would be our record, not yours. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to ask about that service.
Yeah. Okay, we'll make our decision at this time. I think we're aware of the situation then. We might have some questions to ask administration, but other than that, we'll go to camera and make our decision on whether we'll hear your evidence, Mr. Neufeld. We'll hear you for sure, but whether we'll accept the documentary evidence. Thank you. Okay, parties, we made a decision on both since they're both the same circumstances, and we would not likely arrive at a different decision on one after they're both based on the same evidence. So we've made a decision on both, so we won't have to reconsider. Mr. Neufeld, we are of the opinion that the reason for the notice is because the other party has to have time to respond and file rebuttal or whatever is necessary to do so. So ordinarily, with a 1 hour delay, we'd have to say there are rules, those rules cannot be broken, and we'd adhere to them. But in this circumstance, it's unusual because there's been an adjournment. And that adjournment means that although the documents were filed late in September, there's been lots of time for our response. And because of that, we think that it would be prejudicial to not be able to refer to evidence in this instance only. But that doesn't mean that if we were to have the situation where there wasn't an adjournment, that a decision would not be different. So I want to be aware of that. And we are going to hear your evidence, though, until the circumstances have enunciated. And Mr. Dietchen, you can proceed with your evidence on item number 1 when you're ready.
That was 603 St. Mary's, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. File number 24-4407. The roll number is 0802121170, 603 St. Mary's Road. This is roll year 2025, assessed values at $5,122,000. It is a 40S medical office. Is comprised of 3 buildings, 3 premises, 1 story high, with an actual year built of 1959 to 2010, with effective year built overall of 2000. The gross floor area is 28,474 square feet. And then continuing on to page 2 is just a couple overhead views of the subject property. So you can see it's on the corner of St. Mary's and St. Anne Road. Excuse me. Page 3 is a couple exterior shots of the parking lot and the front of the building. Page 4 is an exterior shot of the back of the building, along with the map view of the subject property and the zoning. As you can see on the following page, page 5, it is zone C2. Continuing on to page 7 is the income breakdown. So you can see there's two premises, the main floor, then the basement area. The main floor is at 13,812 at a rate of 22.99. The basement is at 12,460 square feet at a rate of 580. Brings the potential to 389,806 with a vacancy of 5.5%. Expenses are at 3%, and the shortfall's at $8 per square foot, brings the NOI to 345,756 with a cap rate of 7.25%. Brings that portion to $4,769,000. And then the second part on the following page, page 8, is the parking lot stream. So you can see that there's 54 stalls, $30 per stall, brings the annual rent to $19,440. So the NOI is $19,440 at a cap of 5.5%. Brings the value for this portion to $353,000. And then on page 9, you could see the income value summary of the two premises combined. And then page 10 is the comparables for the property. So you can see the first table is the WRHA rent comparables. So you can see they range from about 17 and a quarter to 21.44 with an average of 19.81 and a median of 2015. And then the second table is just to show some OFM comparables. Again, they range from 2037 to 2650, but these are a lot smaller than the subject property. And then the final table is the parking comparables. So you can see that there's a handful of them around the city, around the area, with the mean being 40.81 and the median being 43.35. And then moving on to page 11, you can see is the income and expense mailers. So you can see on the income expense mailers, they're reporting $307,983 for monthly charges, along with the parking revenue of $155,520. So that combined is $464,504 for potential rent. And then if we go back to, scrolling back to our page 9, you can see that our potential is at 409,246 combined. So we're well below that. And the reason being is that we're clearly understating the parking for this property at an NOI of 19,440, where they're reporting 155,520. And that's the total income for that. It's not the NOI. So from my experience and what I've seen in the assessment practices, that expenses for parking is roughly around 50 cents. So this is just a rough calculation. If we took 155,520 divided by 50%, 50%, it would be about 77,760 NOI. Using the same cap rate would come out to about $1.4 million. So you can see that we're clearly understating. I'm not saying that it should be $1.4 million, but I'm just saying that we're clearly understating the parking, and that's the big discrepancy for this one, I would say. And then continuing on to page 12, you can see that their total NOI is $106,000, but that's including amortization and mortgage interest. If we took those out, it would be about $415,000 total NOI. And again, going back to our page 9, our total NOI that we're reporting, or that we are using, is $365,000. So we're well below the actual NOI. And again, continuing back, flipping back and forth to page 13, you could see that their rent roll is here. It's kind of confusing because it's showing 13,812 And then it's showing two rents, 1636 and 654. At first, I thought maybe it's the main and basement floor. The applicant may be able to clear that up a bit later in his evidence, but it's showing 13,812, and that's just the main floor. And then to make it more confusing, on page 14, the rent that is paid is 2244 for the space. So the rents may be, like, again, our rents may be slightly on the higher end, but our overall potential rent and NOI is understated due to the parking. And that is my evidence. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Newfield, any questions?
Yes, just one second. Yeah, first on page 1, you're showing an original date of 1959. How did it reach an effective year of 2000?
There was renovations done in 2010 or 2011, I believe, along with an addition as well.
And so what was done?
For some reason, I thought I had it in my evidence, but I don't. I just know that there was $2.5 million in renovations and an addition of 3,052 square feet done in 2010 and 2011.
Are you able to provide the board with a more of a mechanical or mathematical breakdown of how you change a date of this sort?
How I changed the
Yeah, or did you change this date?
I didn't change. I didn't change
Okay.
the effect. No.
Do we know for a fact how it was done?
I do not personally know.
Have you brought anyone from your department who has done this and can explain it to the board?
I do not have anyone here with me. No.
Okay. I just want to ask for the record. No.
Yeah. No.
And the lease structure on this, are you familiar with any of the details of the lease?
Like I said, it was kind of confusing to read on here, but I think in your evidence you have more information.
Well, no, I know what I have, but like you have provided, I guess just this is all you have is on page 11. Any more investigation into the type of lease this is?
This is just what they provided on the mailer, and that's
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now, in regard to parking, this is located on St. Mary's and St. Anne's.
Yeah.
Is it something you've seen that people charge for parking in this neighborhood?
I'm not too sure. Clearly they do, but I'm not too sure besides that.
Well, I mean, that's what I was asking you about the structure of the lease, but like your evidence for parking rents, I'm looking on page 10, bottom of page 10. These are all from either in or around the downtown area, correct?
They would be around the downtown, yeah.
And you brought nothing to demonstrate that parking was a customary charging for parking a customary practice in the suburbs?
I don't have anything in my information.
Okay. And then in regard to your rent comparables that you've brought up, one of these we're going to hear later, obviously, and I'm looking at the top of page 10 on Goulet. In regard to the rest of the ones in your comparables, these are all WHA rents, correct?
On the first table, yeah, correct.
And are you familiar with the lease structure?
In what terms?
Well, knowing how the lease was negotiated and calculated.
No.
Okay. And the ones below that are, I take it OFM means that's the assessment department's coding for medical.
Correct.
So would these be, I'm familiar with some of them, but 10 Queen Elizabeth is a hair replacement, isn't it?
I'm honestly not too sure.
Okay.
Exactly. No.
I just, no, I'm sorry, that's a denture clinic. It used to be hair replacement, but it used to be 10 Main Street. long history for me, but that's fine. Um, were these generally all be people in private practice?
The second table, yeah, they would probably be more private practice.
And what does the subject property do on its site? Do you know?
I can't remember. I was told it, but I don't remember. That was back
Okay.
in.
All right, I'm just going to stick to questions then. Are any of your comparables birthing centers?
I'm not too sure.
Well, have you ever heard of a birthing center in Winnipeg?
I have heard of a birthing center, yeah. Because now you say that does sound familiar.
It's the subject's the one and only, is it not?
Okay. Again, I'm not too sure.
Okay, no, that's fine. And I also noticed that you didn't put in your cap rate table. So where do the cap rates come from?
It is very interesting. I feel like something got cut out of here. I'm not too sure how that got lost.
Well, I mean, it happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So on the next one, we'll have the cap rate table. But yeah, again, I'm not too sure
Yeah,
what was permitted
yeah,
here.
no, I'm looking at the next one, and so then it would normally be the cap rate table that you referred to as generally, and this is the one we've seen for every single property in the city of Winnipeg. You have a table that says your rates, the 20th and the 80th, and then a couple of other parties, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Where would this cap rate for this particular property be derived from? What's its genesis? What type of does this compare to?
What does it
Like
compare
it's
to?
office, I take it.
It's office. Yeah.
And you've got your classifications are OFS, OFB, OFA,
Yeah.
and then this is OFM.
Correct.
Do you have a separate cap rate calculation for OFM?
No, we don't have that in our table, and neither does Collier, CBRE, or Cushman and Wakefield.
Yeah, you don't have to say that. That's what I was going to say later, but but you don't have a specific calculation. So if you don't have a specific calculation, then are you relying on a different category?
No,
You know?
like our cap rate tables are just to show that our cap rates fall in line with the market cap rates through Collier, CBRE,
okay.
Cushman and Wakefield. That's all.
I guess what I'm getting at is, to your knowledge, have there been any sales of similar properties like this that would have produced a cap rate?
I'm not too sure.
Given the uniqueness of this sort of operation, is it? Do you think it's appropriate just to use a generic office or something of the sort? Isn't there? Does the model have any sort of indicator to say we have a very different property here?
I'm not too sure. Generally, medical offices are higher quality and generally have lower cap rates than offices, so I'm not too sure.
Well, if this property were sold on the market, and perhaps for an alternate use, would it receive the same rents as a medical office?
I would say probably. I'm not too sure.
Okay, that's fine. Last questions all have to do with the way that first of all, a backtrack just for the record that pages 7 and 8 are all produced. 7, 8, and 9 are all produced by your model.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. And you have a differential cap rate for parking versus the OFM portion. How many titles are on this property?
I'm not too sure.
Well, can you separately sell the parking?
I'm not too sure.
Okay. And again, in the suburbs, are you going to, we're thinking about the definition of market value, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So would a market participant pay, allow a cap rate to be derived on receiving parking income when the suburbs doesn't generally charge for it? Or if you don't know the answer to that, that's fine. I'm just,
yeah, again, I'm not too sure about that.
Okay. I was sort of asking my own evidence. My apologies. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Ms. Stevens, any questions?
Just in relation to the parking, so you have indicated that based on the actuals, that your workup is much lower than what the parking lot is producing. Is there any reason that wasn't adjusted?
It was something I noticed like when making these, but it would be something we could look at in the future, I guess.
And are you aware of the income from the parking lot? I mean, it sounded like you weren't necessarily aware of what was going on in the building, but is that being derived from hourly parking rather than staff parking? Do you know?
I'm not too sure. I would think it would be monthly parking, but I'm not 100% sure if it's hourly.
Yeah, because I'm wondering, would the model have, given that this isn't a suburban location, would the model have kicked that out because, I mean, obviously, because it would be assumed that it is a monthly parking.
Yeah, I'm not too sure.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So that was the only questions I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Moretsky, any questions?
For the cap rate there, you did not put a cap rate table in there as this has been established. However, the cap rate is 7.5%. For would the model have used just office buildings in its calculation in Winnipeg, or would it consider that this is a medical type facility?
From my understanding, it would take into consider OFM medical properties.
Well, then there would have been some sold in Winnipeg then.
It would probably take into consider like not WRHA ones, but probably the smaller OFMs is my guess. I'm not 100% sure about that though.
Okay.
Yeah. I couldn't find any WRHA ones that have sold recently.
So in terms of offices, then office in Winnipeg, 7.5 would be on the higher or lower end or middle. What would it be?
For offices, it would be on the higher end. Like our OFAs range from 5.9 to 6.5. Our downtown or OFBs are 7 to 7. Suburbans are 5.5 to 6.75 for 28th percentiles.
And this and the model gave this one a little bit higher because it's a medical facility. Is that correct?
It's also a large medical facility as well, which would take into account.
Large medical facility.
Yeah.
Page 12. So you said the profit loss of 106,376 doesn't take into consideration that the interest expense should not be included. Is that correct?
Mortgage and amortization are ones that we don't include in our expenses. Yeah. Or it's
Okay. And then you're saying if you added those ones in, then you would still be lower than what the actual is then.
Yeah, the actual would be around 415,000.
Okay. And up on page 11, you were going through some figures on the rent for the building and then the parking. And then you mentioned a figure of 1 million something NOI that I just wasn't clear what you were talking about. Do you remember that?
I don't think I mentioned $1 million NOI. The NOI, like once taking out the amortization and interest would be 415, like total NOI. If we're
I just heard a figure of 1 million something NOI, and I didn't understand what that was. So you don't remember saying that?
I don't I don't think I said that, but yeah, I'm not too sure.
Okay. Okay, but anyways, it doesn't mean anything, so fine. Okay, no further questions.
Oh, sorry, that was considering the parking probably. Is that what we're I was just doing a rough calculation using their parking revenue because this parking revenue is the total that they're bringing in. So it wasn't the NOI. And unfortunately, there's no expenses to look at for the parking. So I was just doing a rough calculation of the NOI of the parking.
Okay, and
So
what was that?
So I took in general, the expenses are about 50% for parking. So I took 50% of the 155, 520, came to about 77, 760 NOI for the parking. And then applying our cap rate that we have for the parking at 5.5% came to about $1.4 million. But
Okay,
again, that's just a rough calculation of,
okay, that's where it came from. then.
yeah, sorry. That's
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, Mr. Detchin, you have a separate cap rate for the parking than you do for the building itself. Would the parking exist if it wasn't for the building? In other words, are other people in the neighborhood parking there?
oh yeah, sorry that I'm not too sure of.
Okay, so you have 7.25 for the building and 550 for the parking lot. Why would the parking lot have a 550 cap rate on it?
I usually parking lots have a lower cap rates in around the 4 and 5% cap. I'm not too sure why, but that's just what I've seen for our cap rates.
Okay, but that would be for a separate parking lot, though. This parking lot is really part of the whole if it derives its income because the building's there. Although you're not sure whether that's the
I'm
case.
not I'm not too sure, but I have seen ones with parking lots that have lower cap rates, but yeah, I'm not too sure exactly why.
Okay, I think that with all the other questions asked, I think that completes my questioning. So thank you very much. Mr. Neufeld, you can proceed with your evidence.
Thank you. I have to find where I put it here. Okay. The subject property is a unique project. It's a birthing center, and the idea was to have a building, an operation that was separate from a typical hospital, and to offload some of the demands put on our hospitals by births to a separate center. And these would all be for low risk births that have been, the doctor had indicated would be low risk births. And that was the genesis for this particular project. The building was originally the CKND television studio, and it was remodeled for this particular use. The lease that was made for it was based on complete cost recovery. Now, just to put this in perspective, the Act specifies value is the respect to the property being assessed, the amount the property might reasonably be expected to realize if sold in the open market on the applicable reference date by a willing seller to a willing buyer. So the actual lease is not indicative of that. It's indicative of a business arrangement and a cost recovery. And we're not putting 100% weight on it, on the terms of the lease. And I'll get to that when I get to the valuation part of it. But the other thing to bear in mind is this property, as well as the next one we're going to hear, were all begun by government policy. And the government of the day wanted to go into the neighborhood and build the birthing center, access centers, which is the next property. And this is a way of expanding provision of health services into the neighborhood, taking the load off hospitals, and having better access to health care. And that was their project. Now, as governments change, their approach to it changes. And when this policy started, there were not only access centers, birthing centers, there were also storefront urgent care. So the next government comes in and closes a bunch of these down and moves services over to other sites. And that's what's happening with all of these properties. This is, I'm not critical of any government. It's just that if you're an investor and you want to invest in a property that's been set up as a government project and you see the policy changes with every elected government, it's not a good investment. Now, they're going to pay their lease out till the end. That's not the problem. But what are you going to do with the building when it's done? it was purpose built, in this case, purpose renovated for a birthing center, and you're not going to put it on the market and say, oh, birthing center for sale, birthing center for rent, no users. So we're talking about a great amount of capital cost to change it and put it back in the market so that it can hit market value. And the other feature about the definition of market value is that, even though the act doesn't say it, but every other definition says it, is we don't deal with creative financing. Creative financing means cost recovery leases, and that's what this is. The rent, we looked at it, we did rely on the lease provisions because we found them to be generally indicative of market, and you can see the excerpts on page 3 from the lease. So right now we're in the term where the above ground space is at 1674 and the below ground space is at, sorry, I'm not, what did I say, 16? I better read the top here. 1674, and the basement space is at 654. These generally fall into what you would anticipate for the market for properties. And we had a couple of other properties we looked at and listed out. Just some of them were the WHA sites, and some were market sites, and as well as a longer list on page 8. The message, the one on page 8, the one that probably makes the most sense to look at for the above ground space is 850 Pembina and then 1750 Main. 850 is strictly office, 1750 is doctor's offices. So there's support for their numbers on that basis, but there is no support for parking rent. The parking rent was an inclusion because the tenant, who is the provincial government, have contracts with unions, and the unions require parking to be provided. That's just the nature of things. So they have to get it in writing that the parking is guaranteed. So this is not a feature that would replicate in the open market. This is an add-on that is not appropriate. That's why we discounted it entirely. And we think that that was the best way to reach market values, just to ignore that sort of income. As a result, our NOI, or sorry, our potential rent becomes the 312,000. In regard to the vacancy, the vacancy rate, now Johnson report does have an office vacancy medical suburban section, and that's on our page 9. And you can see that in the appropriate report for the appropriate period, the medical suburban was 16.8% in a medical office suburban. Now the sample size isn't huge, but it does indicate exactly what I was saying earlier, is that the prospects for medical in the suburbs, government-driven projects, is risky. They change. Now, we did provide this, and the backup corridor, I'm just reading it right here, is all published. The city is a subscriber to the Service Johnson report, and they have the list of the suburban medical, and there are 47 records in suburban medical, which indicates 16.81% of vacancy. So it's well researched. Now, just to point out for the record and in verbal rebuttal, that one of the assessor's comparables, 1020 Lorimer, has a 12% vacancy as of this report. So it's not something that, if you're going to value this as a medical building, then you've got to live and die by these standards. So an application of as the assessor's suggesting, of 5.5% is inappropriate for a risk building like this. We think our 16% is indicative of the market. Not we don't have our blinders on. The rest of the valuation in our mind is fairly normalized. We put in a non-recoverable expense. The city has stopped doing it to the extent. I gotta tell you, I stay up nights and wonder how come anyone listens to what the city says. And it's not that I'm trying to be rude about it, but let's just get right to the point. Real estate's about money. It isn't about hypothetical. It isn't about models. It's about money. You give your investor his dividend at the end of the day. They count the non-recoverables. They don't get non-recoverables. It's not free money growing on trees. Follow the money, you follow the value, and that's what you have to be concerned with, is to follow the money. And every property has non-recoverables. Now, in this case, what you're going to find is the non-recoverables will be different than another building because there's a long-term lease. So you're going to have very, very low non-recoverables, but then when it goes vacant, the non-recoverables will be huge. The appraisal practice is simply to take those non-recoverables and amortize them over the length of the lease. So if when you go dark on year 20 and you're vacant for 8-9 months, your vacancy, divide that back, your shortfall and your non-recoverables, divide that back into the next 20 years or the previous 20 years, whatever you want to do. It'll come to 5%. It's a very strong industry norm. The shortfall is less than what the assessor has stated because we're using actual and the property is school tax exempt. The major cost on the shortfall is our property taxes. So we're being true to its nature. Now, considering this on the open market, you do not carry that exemption forward with you. So there may be some adjustment for it on an open market transaction that you would have to consider. For these purposes, we thought, to be fair, we would use the actual, as we've always used the actual. That gets us an NOI of 217,514. Our cap rate is, as you probably figured from my questions, is there's no such thing as a medical center, a medical building cap rate. As a matter of fact, the only ones that have been selling have been converted to the apartment, like the medical arts building. Or the other one that sold was the other one that was on our docket today. They got moved. They went bankrupt. So not a good investment. Now, in a proper theory, though, I do have to say that you can't take your risks in two different places. So if we have a high vacancy rate, then you're accounting for that in your capitalization rate. So I think our cap rate is a touch too high. The points we pointed out here have been addressed in rent and vacancy, like the concept of being built to suit. Well, we didn't structure our rental income on that, so that's probably not a factor. The whole concept of how long will this last due to government policy? Well, 16% vacancy accounts for an awful lot. So I think we should adjust this cap rate. And I'm sorry, I'm having some vision problems. I'm always having vision problems. I think that probably something similar to what the assessor has isn't unreasonable to use on our income. And a comment about me making changes, I do it an awful lot. When I started doing this 20 odd years ago, our board chairman encouraged us to try to have a debate in front of the board because they said it's better you guys settle it than leave it to us. So it's a habit I picked up, and I won't stop. So I love to change the numbers, but I think we would probably cap the whole thing at 7.25, and that works out to I just want to double check that. It's a very strange number. Okay, 3 million even. Well, 3,193,000, but 3 million. And so that's our workup at 7.25%. I think we've addressed the risk in the other areas. It's significant decrease, but I have to also explain something. When we took on the portfolio for WHA in 2016, we had a plan, and the first plan was to all of these properties were fully taxable, was to get them firmly into school tax exempt where they belong, and then work on the value. And as time passed from the original build to suit leases, they became less relevant in terms of the marketplace. So this is our goal now, is to now get them back to market value. So that is my number. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ditchin, any questions?
Just a few. Just looking at, I guess, the vacancy, or looking at your work on page 1, it seems like you use a lot of actual numbers from their information. How come you didn't use the actual vacancy? Because from what I could tell, this property hasn't been vacant, or it's been leased since 2011 for this same tenant.
Well, firstly, all properties are addressed with a vacancy risk, regardless of their performance. So the goal in valuation is to see what that risk would be and where it lies. And as I did mention while I was saying this, is that you have a long-term lease, but what's going to happen at the end of the lease, you're going to be vacant. A building like this, it could be 1 or 2 years because you're looking for a whole tenant, or you're going to have to spend money to convert it. So vacancy isn't just a picture in time with a single tenant building. It's a risk level measure. You're buying it, you're accounting on the income, but down the road, it's going to end for 1.5 years. So if you took 100% vacancy for 1.5 years and then amortize that over the lease, you're going to find that it's in the double digits. And that's what you would put for your risk. The other reasoning behind it is, I mentioned we had the list here from the Johnson report, and many of them are actually single tenanted buildings that have gone vacant and experienced that. Some of them are multi-tenanted buildings that have gone vacant. It's just a feature of this style of property.
So you're essentially applying the 12% vacancy for the potential that in 2036 that this will go vacant and might not occupy again.
Well, it might go vacant in other ways. If government policy changes and they terminate the lease, and there are provisions in the lease for termination, along with penalties, of course. But now imagine the scenario: you have a change in government, and the new government says, "Yeah, we don't want this anymore. We'll pay to have the lease terminated." So the owner gets his money, and then he puts it up for sale, empty building. That's what we're valuing on the risk side. Isn't is how likely is that to happen? And I think as a political project, it is very likely.
But that's just a hypothetical assumption then.
No, this is this is all based on theory, a standard theory of the that the Appraisal Institute teaches. This is where figuring out what the risk is and where to put it. To simply accept it's full, it's going to stay full, is misleading. In this particular instance, you need a vacancy consideration and a risk consideration. And anecdotally, if you take a look at all the new buildings that have gone up in the last few years in health services funded by government, you'll note that they've all been placed on hospital campuses. Right? 280 Booth. You heard about the Oak Recovery Center on the Vic campus, and the expansion of services Hippany and Concordia campus, Wellness Center, Seven Oaks campus, and the HSC Foundation just took over the Manitoba Clinic on the HSC campus. This is the direction that we're seeing now. So I think it's very realistic to assume that. And the relocation to the hospital campuses was partly at our recommendation, simply because these places had exemptions that that the freestanding sites didn't have, and it was save our province money on health costs. And they listened to our input on it, and they listened to their own people's input on it, so we know the direction it's going in.
Did you consider any comparable properties when looking at the rent, or just the actuals?
Well, as I was going through this, I was explaining a couple that we had looked at. There's some pictures of some that are of interest, and we put the build to suit WHA sites in there. There's some of these that probably aren't, like page 7, I would just ignore. That's just us doing one brief for everybody. Page 8, I mentioned 850 Pembina is probably a really good example, and of leases that were written up in the near past for office use. 1750 Main, which is a private clinic and a worse location and an inferior building, hence the lower rates. And we looked at those. And there was also down about 2/3 of the way down, 1558 Wilson, which was a convert from a warehouse to office at 1050. And as I mentioned, this is a convert from a television studio to a birthing center. So that gives us kind of a market flavor for the reaction that you're going to see putting it on the market.
No further questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Bresky, any questions?
Yeah, so WRHA rents this property, is that correct?
That's correct. Well, it's they keep changing their their names for themselves. It's now Shared Health. Because the Shared Health will do the capital costs, and then the Regional Health Authority is the operator.
And they've been renting since or leasing since 2011, is it?
Well, they started this project, I think, in 2008, 2009, and they hired Colliers, Chris Cleverly and Pat Burke, to go out and find sites and negotiate deals on build-to-suit contracts.
Okay. And so it's an old building now. Has it had the same owner since 1959? Probably not, right?
I don't know. No, I don't know. I'm working for the tenant.
Okay, no, fair enough. Just want to know if you know that or not. So, but it was the CKND before.
Right.
So was that the same owner that owned it and CKND rented out from them? Is that fair to say? So it's been the same owner for
Do you have a
more than
title
20
number?
years?
Is there a title number on it? You can usually tell by that. I don't have it in my data. I'm not sure.
So all the renos that were required to be done to convert from what it was to what it is now, that was on WRHA, correct?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And the idea is that the money that was spent on it wasn't all just for the building and the real estate. It was also to outfit it properly as a birthing center, which is a standard that is not going to be recovered on the market. And you know that the health standard and the building code requirements for a birthing center are higher. You're not going to recover it on the market. That was our point.
Right. So when you have a kind of a special use facility like this, that's actually fetching pretty good rent for the owner. When you look at the income approach, would you not compensate for the fact that it's a special use building with the cap rate? Isn't that why the cap rate's higher in the first place?
Well, I think I mentioned that. Yeah, you have when you're appraising it, you would look at it one of two ways. One is you would assign a market rent to it, and and then look more to market caps, or you could use the paid rent and then use a higher cap. I think we chose the original workup you saw, quite honestly, was using a market rent and a special use cap rate, and that's why I changed it to 7.25. If you have a market rent, then you use a market cap. Now, if we had stuck with the actual paid rent, we would have capped. I probably would have kept the cap where it was at 8.75, because part of the cap thing is, and I know you don't know if you're in the mood for long stories, but when you
maybe I'll just finish where I'm going, I guess.
okay,
Yeah. So do you agree that the assessor had the actuals on his page 12 or something there, and he agreed he had the NOI at 106, and then he said, but you got to add in those two other figures to get somewhere over 400,000. That was the actual NOI. You didn't question that. I'm just wondering.
no.
Do you agree with that the actual is 400 and something thousand for 2022?
No, because part of what that NOI representative was the return on the tenant improvements as well, and the overages over and above market value. It's a cost recovery scheme, right? So it's not rent. So a cost recovery scheme is you pay full costs, and the difference is that amortization period of the return rate. So a cap rate is set at usually an occupancy period of 35 years with a revisionary amount at the end, assuming the property is sold. That's the theory. Whereas a cost recovery scheme is geared at the length of the lease and full recovery, no reversion at the end. So the return rates are higher. Usually you will see the cost recovery be 2 points higher than a cap rate on the theory side of it. And that's why, your choice is higher cap to equate to the cost recovery scheme. They want, with the build to suit, the developer understands at end of term, he's got a building that's going to cost a lot of money to put a lot of money into it to change the use and bring it to market. So he wants all of his money out now during term. Whereas in a standard system, they'll rent the building, and at end of term, they still have the same building to rent, and you can go to the 35-year amortization period instead of the lease amortization. That's the theory behind it. And I'm working on actually another medical building like this in another province on exactly the same concept, is to split these to a build to suit tenant improvement costs out from real estate costs. And I'm not making this theory up. This is the standard, the International Financial Review standard, that if you're trade on the stock exchange, you've got to clarify how much of your money comes from real estate, how much comes from recovery of excesses on it. We're just trying to simplify it. Move it to market rent, move it to market cap.
Okay. No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Stevens, any questions?
Yeah, so you have not included the parking income in your workup at all. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So assuming you've been talking about the building going dark, the tenant leaving, but assuming that the current owner wants to put this on the open market right now, not 10, 20 years from now, would that income from that parking not be considered as part of the value of the building?
No,
if the tenant is remaining?
No one's going to pay for it. This particular tenant pays for it because they need to guarantee their staff are.
Yeah, but if the tenant's remaining in the building is my question.
If the tenant's remaining in the building, they're going to have to live with the terms of the lease. Lease gets sold with the building, and the landlord.
Yeah, so the income is there then. That's my point. Until
end of term, right? Not in perpetuity. And that was what we were getting at. So we're now in year 14, and so we have 11 years left on it. So we have 11 years at that rate. And my point is that after the 11 years expire and you're going to market rates, then you're not going to get it. But you're also describing a leasehold interest, sorry, a leased fee estate, not market value. And that's the theoretical break there, is that if you're going to follow, and we normally follow very strictly, I've always felt that paid rent is the best indicator, then you are essentially doing a leased fee. But in this case, we knew that the original lease was not negotiated on market value concepts. So you can't well, that's why we can't follow it in this case. And as I said, but my colleagues at Colliers were the ones who did it. So well, I'm not talking about hearsay. We're talking about what actually happened. This isn't evasive. This isn't sharp practice. This is actually the basics of appraisal theory. If you're going to chase the fee simple, then you got to make sure your rent is fee simple, and then you can do it. This we know it's not.
Well, it just seems odd that there's a chunk of income that's not reflected here at all. But anyway, that was your choice, and you've explained it, so thank you. Just one other question about the parking. Do you know, are you aware, Mr. Neufeld, if there is hourly parking there? So like if my partner is there having a baby and I go to visit, or I'm family member and I go to visit, am I paying, can I park on that lot and pay hourly parking? Are you aware of that?
I'm gonna think, but I don't believe so. I think there's provision in all these suburban sites for patient and visitor parking for free.
For free. So the paid is strictly the monthly with the staff then?
It's to guarantee the spots for staff, yes.
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you. That's all my questions.
Okay. Mr. Neufeld, most of my questions have been asked already, but I'm reflecting back to first of all, Ms. Stevens. And I'm looking at the property on page 1. You have a map, a diagram. You show significant parking both at the point of the triangle where St. Mary's meets St. Anne's, and at the back. And if this property was offered on the market, would that parking not enhance? The parking would enhance the property. Would that not reflect in a higher sale value of the property?
I do not believe that the value would be impacted by the parking other than the normal term. And we have a property that is on 1.3 acres with floor area of, I think we're not in disagreement, 13,800 square feet. So we're talking about a 4-to-1 ratio on parking, which is similar to, that's actually under the zoning bylaw, that I believe that's the prescribed amount for commercial. So it's ordinary, average. I think that's the way the market would look at it.
Okay.
And the pointy part is interesting. Like you know, because it's a great corner for advertising, but I don't think they use that. And I don't think they'll get permission to put signage up. Okay.
So you answered that question. I don't know if I agree with you, but I'm not going to change your answer. I think that the property, the amount of it enhances it. And I think if that parking wasn't there, the property wouldn't be worth as much as it might be otherwise.
But every property has that amount of parking that's in competition with it in the suburbs due to planning bylaws.
Okay, I heard your answer. Second question. So you're saying that because the property was enhanced to facilitate this tenant, that part of the rent is just payback of all of the money that was put into it to make it rentable to this tenant for the purpose that it's used for, and shouldn't be considered as part of the rent. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct. It's essentially a lower amortization period on the return on that money, and the fact that these improvements are of little to no use to alternate users.
So why would that make that different than a building was built from scratch for a certain purpose. And then everything would be capitalized, and there would not be a differential, the one you described.
Well, I can actually speak to an example that the assessor brought up, which was 1020 Lorimer. That was a purpose-built medical building, but it was built as shell space. Every lease that was written after for occupants was then how much do you need for your tenant build out? And so they took the shell space rent, added the cost of the build out, amortized it over a shorter term, higher interest rate, and added it to the rent. That's the typical practice. And that's what happened here. That's the math behind it. And I'm not, I dream about these things at night. One of the things I promised myself, I was not going to oversimplify this to make it this is the gritty way that deals are done on the tenant improvement side. They are, and that's why we have to be careful of using leases that have cost recoveries built into the lease rate. It will not stand the scrutiny on the market. That's why I read the definition of market value before. If you want to get the value for these leaseholds, you have to find another birthing center to sell it to. There aren't any.
Okay. So what's the difference then between tenant inducements then and what we're describing here?
The tenant inducement is essentially a cash. Tenant improvement is the physical work, and the inducement can pay for it or not pay for it, or you can buy a car with it if you want, if it's just straight cash payout.
But it's the same thing though, Mr.
No, they're not, because the tenant inducement is you're borrowing money. The tenant improvement, you're putting in a wasting asset. All tenant improvements on leased property have a lifespan to them, and it's generally the length of the lease. Anything that's done, I'm sitting in an office now where we rented it $8 with shell space, 17 with the fit out, and they stripped it down to the bare amount, redid the HVAC, put in these stupid offices that I'm sitting in, got the ugly rug, and paid for all that. 10 years from now, it's worthless. We got to do it all over again. And so it's not a question of ignoring it. It's a question of understanding that different parts of real estate have different amortization and recovery times. And to simplify them in a cap rate is incorrect. A cap rate is on an enduring asset, 35-year life minimum. That is the payback period. A tenant inducement is a 10-year usually lifespan. In this case, 20 years, or sorry, 25 years. 11 are left. When we to shop this on the market, the knowledgeable buyer would be aware of this. A knowledgeable buyer is not going to buy this on the lease and say, well, this is wonderful, we're going to get $400,000 forever. They're not. They're going to say, I'll probably get 300 for it on the market, and I'm going to have to put some capital in it.
Well, how do we know? Yeah, how do we know that the lease is not going to be extended?
Because it doesn't matter if we do or we don't, but we're not in the business of hypotheticals. You can't tax somebody on maybe it'll get renewed. We can only tax on what we know, not on what could happen. What we know is that it ends at a certain point. What we know that it's government policy, which is subject to change with every elected government. That's all we know. So I wouldn't make any assumption on that whatsoever.
So why would this
be misleading?
Why would this be different than any other property, though? Any property you buy has a lease that might expire someday. Why would this property be any different than any other property in the city?
Because it was built as a birthing center. There's no other birthing centers in the city.
And some properties are
It's got bedrooms downstairs for short-term stays. It's got the nursery. It's got it's not a Walmart. Retail stores, you got 6 walls. That's all you need.
Okay. I have no further questions
Can I ask one more question, please, Mr. Chair?
Yes, certainly, Mr. Moretzi.
Okay. On your leases that you have listed here, so they go from year 1 to year 25, is that correct?
Yes.
I'm just talking about the main floor here. So when was this agreement started?
Um, I have that date. It just it will take me about 20 seconds to answer that. This is, let's see.
Would it have been 2011?
Um, I'm just on the page here. 603, got it. November 9th, 2010.
Okay, so this lease is in place
Oh,
until
the start date,
5.
I'm sorry, the start commencement date was December 31st, 2010.
Okay, so this lease goes approximately 2035 then? It's a step up lease.
Yeah, it's let me just double check the terms here to see if any of these are options or if they're mandatory.
Well, I don't know, it's not that important. So in terms of my question, just the values that you have here, they don't seem to jive with what the income and expense mailer in the city's information respect to the income. It doesn't seem to jive with these numbers here.
Well, I think there's an allocation for parking rent in there that was the main difference. Like the actual lease for the premises alone are exactly as we have stated.
Mhm.
And the parking is for there's electric parking stalls and 29 non-electric. There's 25 electrified and 29 non-electrified parking stalls that are stipulated in the lease. And the rent on them is at this point in time is $265 per stall. So this is in the suburbs, $265 a stall. I don't think any of my clients who have apartments nearby get more than $35 a month for it. I got outside stalls downtown that we're paying $160 for. So this doesn't meet the test of market in any way. This was a requirement and a structure that the lease was at the time.
And I think Ms. Stevens asked you if the parking was included in this, on these terms. So for the figures that are there, parking is included then.
We have not included parking because we do not believe it meets the definition of market value.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Thank you. As all questions been asked, before we close the hearing, does any of the assessor or Mr. Neufeld wish to have a summation?
I guess just quickly, again, this is a 25-year lease property, so I feel like there's little to no risk here. We can't really make assumptions about vacancy and rents in 10, 11 years. We have to look at the actual information that we have in front of us, and they're reporting an NOI of $415,000. If you don't want to, like, and that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld.
Thank you. I've been through 3 different administrations while working for WRHA. So what I'm telling you is the reality of healthcare in our province is that things change, governments change, policy changes, not good investments for this type of property because it's not core to their business, as we can say, and it will change over time. And when it does change over time, you're going to get a building that was customized for one particular use. You're going to have to spend money to change it. This does not meet the definition of market value. That this was built for a specific user, And you can characterize it in many different ways. You could say it's part of the business income. If you're doing a build up for a restaurant, we wouldn't have a problem. I'd say, well, you have the hoods and the seats and the grills and everything. It's for the business, and most people would understand it. It's the same issue here. This is built for a birthing center. There's nothing like it. So you can't, if you're going to assess it as one, then you're going to have to live with a lot more issues, like the fact that there is no alternative use. Cap it high, could be 10%, because down the road, when it's at end of life, the cap rate requires a residual value at the end. How much is my base worth at the end to sell? That's how you make up a cap rate. End of this one, it's going to be a negative, because you're going to have to spend money to fix it and change it and put it back on the market. And it'll be not 35 years, it'll be 25 years. And so I understand that these issues are like for us, and I'm not saying anything about I know more than anyone else, but I've got, years and years of training and experience. So this stuff comes very easily to me. And I understand that to a board that I'm getting into matters that we, usually you're used to hearing people trying to simplify things. I don't want to simplify this. This is complex, and our number is right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Okay, I see that it is 10:27. I think that we should take a break now for a few minutes, since we've been going for an hour and a half. And how about we resume at 10:35? Thank you. Okay, we now proceed with item number 2, 170 Goulet Street. And in this situation, we already indicated that we're accepting Mr. Neufeld's evidence, in spite of the fact that it was filed an hour late originally because of the same reasons that I gave before. And Mr. Neufeld, again, there's a classification and exemption. I guess your classification and liability are again before us, but you're not presenting any evidence on those items, correct?
Well, actually, I'm not entirely sure. I just had a question first, whether or not we pursue it, and that would be in the assessor's workup. It has $95,000 listed as fully exempt, and I take it that it's on page. The workup for that is on page 7. Is this the city of Winnipeg's space?
Is that a question for me?
Yeah, it is. It is. There was no
Yeah,
explanation.
Yeah, it's from my understanding, it's a community services portion run by the government. Yeah,
By the city of Winnipeg.
I believe it's by the city.
So that's the act where the city, if the city has space that they're not taxable.
Right.
Okay. No, then no, we have no issues with it. We'll just proceed as normal.
Are you okay? Are you saying then that you're withdrawing your?
Again, I got to get instructions from council, and I don't have those. So we'll just let you rule on the evidence.
That's fine. Thank you. Okay, so we're ready to begin then. Mr. Gishin, you can proceed with your evidence on 170 Goulet Street, please.
Okay, it's file number 24-4313. The roll number is 060930999900. The address is 170 Goulet Street. The roll year is 2025. There are two portions. There's a 40S that's $11,984,000, and then a 40E fully exempt at $95,000, bringing the total value to $12,079,000. It is a medical office comprised of 2 buildings, 2 premises at 4 stories high. It was built in 2016. The gross floor area is 50,865. Page 2 is just the overhead view along with the Google map view of the subject property. And then page 3 is a couple exterior photos of the subject. And then page 4 again is the map view showing the zoning for the subject property at C2. And then continuing on to page 6 is the subject property market income breakdown. So you can see the first income stream is 50,614 square feet at a rate of 1869 a square foot. brings the potential rent to 945,976 at a vacancy of 5.5% and an expense is 3%. With the shortfall at $8 per square foot brings the NOI to 844, 859 with a cap rate of 7.05%, brings this value to $11,984,000. Page 7 shows the 40E portion, so it's only 251 square feet at a rate of 29.61, brings the potential to $7,432. Again, with the vacancy of 5.5%, expenses 3%, shortfall at $8 a square foot, brings the NOI to 6,702 with a cap of 7.05%, brings the total value for this portion at $95,000. And again, page 8 is the summary of these income streams and the total. Again, the total value is at $12,079,000. Again, page 9 is the WRHA comps. So these are similar to WRHA buildings. You can see actually the first one is the subject property at 1979 a square foot, but they range from 17.25 to 21.44 with an average of 1981 and a median of 2015. Page 10 is our cap rate table, just showing the cap rates for office, industrial, retail, multifamily, and hotel, and how they compare to Colliers, CBRE, and Cushman & Wakefield. Page 11 is the Municipal Assessment Act excerpts. Then page 12 and forward are the income and expense mailers. If we skip to page 16 is the income statement. So you can see that the income they are reporting is for just the rent of the office is $1,006,000. With the parking included, it's about $1,050,000. And going back to ours, our total potential rent is at $953,403. So we're below what they are reporting. And again, if we go to page 17, we can see that the NOI is at $164,000, but again, that's including mortgage and interest payments. So if we remove those, the NOI would be around $990,000. And again, back on page 8, we're reporting NOI of about $851,000. And then finally, and then continue on to page 18, you can see the lease information. So this one shows it clearly that they're paying $19.79 for the area. And again, we're at $18.69 for the main area. And then finally, page 20 is just the permit for the construction. And you can see the total project value being at $9.1 million. And that is my evidence. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Neufeld, any questions?
Yes. On the breakout here for this space, was it fair to say that this city space is a sublet?
I would guess so, but I'm not 100% sure how that works.
Why wouldn't you have just taken a piece from the sublet? Why does it need higher separate values?
I'm not too sure. That's just how it was put in there when the building was added in. I didn't add this.
What about the other sublets in the building?
I'm not too sure about those.
So
I'm not.
You're not aware of any of them. Does you normally put a separate allocation for sublet property in a building?
I'm not too sure.
I mean, why I'm asking about it is, of course, is that you appear to be working in some sort of economy of scale, smaller space, higher rent.
Yeah, that's what I would assume. Yeah.
And so, fair to say that if maybe all the parcel was together, there might be a lower rent that the model might show overall.
If those two are together.
I don't know the way the model works, but I'm just basically on theory that it would show a lower rate, wouldn't it? Maybe
Like
a
if you
penny.
blended them?
Yeah, no, not blended. just forgot about it and simply called the whole thing 50,865 square feet.
Maybe a few cents. It's only a couple hundred
Yeah,
square feet.
yeah, okay.
Okay, yeah.
I was
sorry.
going for a few cents.
Okay.
Um, and 6, 7, and 8 then is, of course, all done by the model. And same questions I asked before, page 9, these are WHA sites. You've listed here that the paid rent is $19.79 a square foot for the head lease. Do you have a copy of the lease handy?
I have the rent roll that they provided.
The rent roll, but not the lease.
No, we don't get those generally.
Well, you do because I sent it, but you didn't get it, right?
I never received it. No.
Okay. So then you're not aware that the landlord included in his rent provided what's called an interior fit up costs of $145 a square foot.
It's not my information. I don't have anything to speak about that.
Do you know what the term fit up means? By any chance?
I kind of, but not enough to explain it. No.
Okay, no, that's fair. I don't want to put you in the spot. It's fine. The lease was made at time of was made at the time of the construction, correct? You got a start date of 16.
Yeah.
Lease started 2016.
That was the first portion of it. This one, it started in 21 to 26. So I guess it's the second step of it.
Okay. You don't have the original date of the lease then.
Well, on page 18 it says it started in 2016, like the first
Okay.
step. But yeah, that's all I got about that.
Okay. And what does it say the term is?
Like the total term?
Yeah.
2016 to 2041.
Okay. So again, 25 years.
Yeah.
Okay. And I don't think I have any new questions. So I'm assuming that anything I ask now would just be a repeat, and we're just going to carry forward with the same questions, same answers assumed. Is that fair?
We will. That's correct, Mr. Neufeld.
Okay. Okay. Well, just to carry on with my first question, page 18, it does show that there is only one lease in the building, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Mariski, any questions?
I do not have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Stevens, do you have any questions?
So you have any sense of why for this particular property, the parking is not split out in a separate stream? Smaller parking area? Is any sense of that?
That I'm not too sure. I'd have to look into that after the fact.
Yeah, because I know they're doing different things in both these buildings, but they are medical facilities with parking and parking revenue. So yeah, they've been treated entirely differently.
Yeah, I would have to look into that.
Yeah. Okay, that was my only question. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Ditchin, I'm looking at the table you have for cap rates. And I guess it's under office. Which heading would you put it under, this property?
Again, this wouldn't be necessarily any under any heading. These are just to show the cap rates and how they compare to the Collier, CBRE, and Cushman and Wakefield.
Okay.
Again, this one doesn't specifically fit everyone. Okay,
well, I'm thinking the closest that I could find would be probably suburban A office. Would you think that might be correct?
I'd say probably suburban. Like, we don't specify actually suburban A and B; those are combined.
And they really have the same rates, so it doesn't really matter. But
yeah.
Okay, so at 20%, though, that would generate a cap rate of 5.25, and 80% would be 6.75. Do you have any idea why this particular property has been capitalized at 7.5%? Or
Again,
0.05, I should say.
Again, like I don't know if it specifically would fit into there, but I think it has to also do with the very large size of the property.
Okay, that's my only question.
That's all I could speak on. I can't say anything else. Like I don't know.
Okay. Fair answer. Thank you. Okay, that's completes the questioning. So, Mr. Neufeld, you can proceed with your evidence.
Thank you. I'm not entirely sure how to follow this up, but the chairman, you asked the question about wouldn't this be Class A, and I felt that was inserting in evidence into it. And I want to ask the assessor, I'm going to address that later, and I want to ask the assessor a question or two on that. How many suburban Class A buildings are there in the city of Winnipeg? Do you know?
From my understanding, not many, if any.
Okay. And how about Class B? Do you know how many there are?
I wouldn't know that. No.
Okay. Sorry, I just wanted to double check something. Yes, sorry, that's all I wanted to ask. As a follow-up.
Okay. You received your evidence, Mr. Neufeld.
Yes, thank you. Well, as I said, I'm not out to call anybody on anything, but I don't like when this argument about classes, because I don't think it's appropriate. There are 3 Class A buildings in Winnipeg. 5 Donald, 1661 Portage, 1780 Wellington, and I'm reading from the Johnson report. There are 9 Class B buildings, and this isn't one of them. It's classless, actually. It would probably belong in suburban medical. I don't have a listing here though for it on Goulet, or perhaps it's on Marion. No, it's not on Marion. So it's just not in anybody's listing. It's certainly not in a building, certainly not a B building. It was, going to my evidence, it was built for the user. Again, the Winnipeg Regional Health Authority as an access center. The lease was actually written in 2013 for commencement 2016. We do not dispute the recoveries on the lease. What we dispute is that they are not on market. And in this particular case, I understand that this particular assessor may not have access to all of the details, but the lease has been submitted to the city. And the difference between, as we were discussing before, is how much of the cost is going for non-realty, how much of the cost is just for building recovery costs. In this case, we do know the number. It was $145 a square foot was allocated for fit up. Fit up doesn't mean base rent. Fit up doesn't mean real estate. Fit up means to run your business. And for that particular reason, we do not consider this to be a market lease. I didn't think this matter was at dispute, because we had submitted the lease on this, but this is my verbal evidence, and I'm happy to share this lease with you if you need to read it. I understand it'd be late, but the way we looked at this was more of a market-driven rate, and as opposed to the last one we heard, where we came to the conclusion that the market on the space itself was pretty close. In this particular one, we're again referring to our page 7 as well as the other examples, and we selected a rate of $16 a square foot. Again, we are not dealing with a market value lease. That's the key here, this one and the last one. They were not written at market value. They represent a leased fee and include non-realty items. So $16 a foot is what we applied. We did not charge for parking. Now, arguably in this part of town, we do know some people charge for parking, all of the lands surrounding St. Boniface Hospital charge for parking. That practice ends pretty much on at Marion and Goulet. We've never found somebody who charged for parking outside of the St. Boniface campus, and so we reject the notion that it would have been, and simply say that that was a requirement to guarantee leasing spaces for to satisfy the union contract. There are multiple users in here, and there's no dispute that they're all exempt from the school tax exempt, and the city exempted their little stall. The city has it's not an office, it's a desk on the main floor. And the province has a desk on the main floor, and the government of Canada has a desk on the main floor. They're just simply school exempt. The city, you can go pay your water bill there. So they made it exempt because its services are provided, and city leased property is exempt because they're the taxing authority. But that's all head lease. Those are all sublets of the head lease, and the property on the market would be driven by, it's a single tenant building, pure and simple. It is not demised for separate occupancy. You could likely demise the floors with elevator lockouts, but each single floor is not demisable. And so what we have is a 50,000 square foot suburban office. That is probably one of the issues where my opinion on it, and I didn't write this up, is that I wouldn't have put the rent as high as $16 simply because there's the product that's on the market. 50,000 square foot single building lease is far and few in between. They just don't happen. And I know this is verbal. I'm just glancing through the Johnson report on big spaces that are available for lease in the suburbs, and I'm seeing rates of $12 and $12.50 for big spaces, because a big space is the landlord's problem when it goes empty. But on a market-driven basis, I'm not going to change $16 to a lower amount, because that's the person who did this put in the rate, and I think we're here to try to bridge the gap, not expand it, and I wouldn't do that. Again, the medical suburban is a 16.8% vacancy rate, and that's in the Johnson report. And looking at the buildings that are available, there is actually one building that has large vacancies in it, and that was 790 Sherbrooke, the bankrupt one. That was supposed to be heard today, but there was a supplemental on it, so that got delayed. But that also gives you an indication of how strong the medical market is when a building gets built and goes bankrupt immediately after it's been built. So that's the danger there. 16.8 is fair. My other comments are stand, and you'll note we use the lower shortfall rate because it is school tax exempt, so that's fair. So our NOI is 578,870. As with the other building, I wonder if we haven't addressed all our risks significantly in the selection of a vacancy rate, and there's no need for additional risk levels. I'm just going to suggest we change that to the same cap rate that we had for the last building, which is 7.25%. And I just want to get the theory right here. That changes the value to 7,984,413, 798,441.3, which rounded is 8 million. I like round numbers. So that is our request at 7.25%, which changing the rental rate to a market-based rate, and a market-based medical vacancy capitalization rate, and that is published, and otherwise as indicated. Don't think I have anything new to add that we weren't arguing with already. So that would be my presentation.
Can you,
He was-
can you go over your changes, again, please?
I changed the cap rate from 8% to 7.25%. That's all. So that works out to 7,984,000, and I've just rounded that to 8 million.
Okay, because, and your NOI is 649,066, is that correct?
I thought 578 on
That's
my
what I heard you
document.
say, but it doesn't say that in your,
No, I'm reading page 1. 578,870.
On our page, it says 649.
Oh, really? Okay. Anyone? And that's our document.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, just give me 1 sec to. I noticed there may have been a change. Was there a second submission here? 170 Goulet, 312, 317. So we're just going to open the second document. Yeah, just think if you hadn't accepted it as evidence, you couldn't look at that number. That's a bit strange. 578. Yeah, would you mind just reciting the rows one by one? The first is, do you have 813, 888 for
Correct.
potential?
yes,
And then subtotal 677,155.
no.
No.
What's the vacancy rate?
The vacancy is 83,830,
You have
10.3%.
10.3%.
Really? Oh. Okay, so that's the difference. So let me. Again, I'm not in the business of changing stuff to go lower. I have the original here. So 10.3. So your NOI is 647,757.
I'll let you
649,
answer, Mr. Gunn. Yeah.
Sorry, 647,757.
649,066.
What's the shortfall?
You got a shortfall of $5.70.
70. Okay, that's the difference. 649,089.
649,066.
066. Okay. 649,066. Okay. I still want to change my cap to 7.25. That gets a value of 8,952,634, rounded to 8,953.
$8,953,000.
That's correct. It's a bit, I don't know how that happened, but okay, well, then that's all I have to say, hopefully.
Okay, so I think we're in the process of asking questions, and I think who's asking questions at this time?
Assessor.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
please continue, Mr. Diachin.
Yeah. I guess you're speaking up about the fit up amount of $140 something. Did you include any mailers, any leases to show this calculation and value?
No, this is in the original lease, the original document. I had it open here, and as I said, we submitted it, and actually in 2017 we submitted it to the assessment department.
So there's nothing in your evidence today, though, right?
And it's been properly filed. We requested, we were asked for leases, we provided them, and assessment department chose not to use them, but they are in your files.
Well, would you think it'd be useful to have in your submission today to show this? Because you're speaking about it, so.
I tell you the truth, I just assumed that you would done your due diligence and been aware of it.
But if you just had it in your information, then it would it wouldn't be this issue. So
Well, I
It's just-
believe that we have informed the assessment department and the board several times since 2017 on the fact that the fit up was included in the original lease document. I can, I know it's late, but I can always provide the lease to the board right now. I'm gonna guess they're not gonna want to see it, but I'm testifying to it. I'm under oath, and I know you've got it. What can I say?
I don't know. It's not in my evidence, so that's all I'm going to say to you then. Looking at your page 3, are any of these newer buildings like the subject property?
Page.
Your comparables?
The one on page 3 is comprised of 3 buildings, and I'm trying to remember the exact dates on one of them. One of them is the one that's the middle picture, that the nurses, I believe that's almost a year or 2 difference in age than the subject.
No, I'm looking on your page 3, like all your comparables.
Yeah. Well, that page 3 has got a picture of 850 Pembina, correct?
No.
No.
Oh, good. So you have a different document than me. What does the page 3 look like?
It's a bunch of comparable properties, like, I don't know, a whole bunch.
Starting with 850 Pembina?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So the third one down is about a year or 2 different. It's actually 890 Pembina, but we took call the Civic is 850. It's 3 buildings, and it's a single level with way more parking than the subject. And the other 2 buildings in there, one is 87, one's 95, and like I said, the other one is 2010, I think. That would be the newest ones we have here in the list.
Are any of these medical clinics?
Well, it's actually the nurses organization that they're not medical. That's the nurses organization.
Okay, well, are any of these
No.
WRHA owned?
No, like 1750 Main is all medical, and it's an older, smaller building.
Okay, so I see things like industrial office and other offices. Are those comparable to the subject property?
Some of these are an 845 Lashmodi. This is just the entire rent roll that we reproduced. You can see that there's a bit of a range in there, and the ones at the higher end of the range are all office build up, and the ones at the lower end of the range are combination of office and storage or industrial.
I also see a lot that seemingly have expired before and well before the reference date. Would you find these applicable in this case?
Well, we are in the update mode, but I'm looking at going through the list. I see some of the Lajmodi ones have expired, and that I think the rest of them were active as of April 1st, 2023. Main Street, no, that's not a 5-year lease. I'm looking at 2536 Main. That's actually a 10-year lease, smaller space, but that is active. And there are a few in here that had expired and were renewed.
So I guess I'm just trying to understand, how did you apply the $16 a square foot? Was it based off of these comparables, or was it based off something else?
Well, it was, our process is, we look at our comparables and then we do some consultation with our leasing people. And we look at, all the ones that you're looking at here, the comparables, including some of the WHA sites, and come to a conclusion that way. And I just closed my door because our leasing guy was just walking past. We lease buildings here. We rent, we sell them. We have a very good staff of people who are good at it. So it's we don't use models. We use professional opinions. So this is what it was based on. It was consensus on this, and this one was definitely went to review with our leasing people because of the size of it. The question posed to them was, you got 50,000 square feet in the suburbs, and what are we going to get for it at market? And as I said, I disagree that 16 is the right number, but again, I'm not changing that. I think it would have been lower.
Did you consider the parking in your evaluation at all, or?
Absolutely not. It's a part of the original lease, which is not market value, and in all of these sites have parking, adequate parking for their tenants and their visitors, and they don't charge for it. It's not the practice in the suburbs. As I mentioned, there is the hospital nearby charges for parking. That they've got a captive audience, but this site does not.
All right, I guess again, so you didn't consider the actuals at all for this property, or look at the.
No, we knew from the beginning that this was a lease that was not based on market. Again, it was cost recovery, and this one clear lease term says that they also paid for the finish on it, the interior finish. And a lease is 6 walls. It's not, you don't pay for the moldings and the moldings, yes, but you don't pay for the desks and the finishes and all the rest of it. You lease the wall for 6 walls, serviced and capable of holding someone. So leases don't often reach this line of demarcation where it was clear what they paid for in it and what they didn't pay for. This one did.
I guess again, I'll ask, it's similar to the previous one, but how did you decide to apply a 10.3% vacancy to a tenant with a 25 year?
I don't have the faintest idea how 10.3 came up. I agree with 16.8. And that is what the medical users are seeing for vacancy. And it's not a point in time. It's the entire breadth and length and the knowledge that, again, I'm going to put in simpler terms. If you have a strip mall with 10 tenants in it, you have 10 leases that expire at different times. As a result, you're not going to have all your expiries at once, and they're spread out. So the actual occurrence of a vacancy is an annual event, which is fairly steady. You're going to turn over two sites a year on 10 properties with 5-year terms. That's with this one, you have one that you're going to turn over in 25 years. And the question is, how do you fill up 50,000 square feet, even if it's every 25 years? It's a high risk category. And, to simply say it's being leased now, you're making assumptions. We're not in the assumption business. We're in the fact business, as I answered before.
But you're assuming that it will be vacant and not be leased again in 25 years. That's assuming as well, is it not?
No, I'm assuming what I'm doing is I'm not assuming it's being leased. I am making the judgment based on normal market practices. You have a lease termination. What are the prospects, the odds of getting it renewed? With a government-based lease, they're low.
I think that was all my questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Stevens, any questions?
No, I have no new questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bresky, do you have any questions?
I do not, thank you.
Thank you. And I don't either. So if you require summations, I'll allow Mr. Ditchin first, then you, secondly, Mr. Neufeld.
I guess again, I'll just repeat it. With the 25-year lease, it seems like there's little to no risk. Going by the actuals, I haven't seen anything regarding the lease information from based on their actuals, what they're bringing in and everything. They're reporting an NOI around 990,000 and a total base rent of $1 million, and we're more than fair in our assessment. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Neufeld.
I'm just going to speak on market experience, and that the concept of having a big lease being low risk, it's absolutely incorrect. It's high risk. The investor is looking for income that's stable. The more stable it is, the greater their interest. So if you have, like I said, a large shopping center, a large apartment block, lots of units, that risk is spread out and it's fairly uniform, where they can guess their returns every year. A big tenant is a big problem. And I discussed 790 Sherbrooke. They were going to use the whole thing for the Manitoba Clinic. Bankrupt. Now it's empty. Well, not empty. It's going to be 50% full eventually. But that's a disgusting investment. That's horrible. And we can go through the list of all the properties we've dealt with here, where we have 125 Gary, new evidence. So I'm not going to get into a lot of detail. 2 tenants, lose 1. It's a dog, because that's just the nature of the big tenancy problem. It's a problem every 10 years, every 20 years, but it's a bad, severe problem. And so when we judge the risk, if we're going to use the assessor's argument that, oh, it's a single tenant, what an appraisal we have to do is write an extraordinary assumption. We're going to assume it's going to be renewed. And that is, as I stated, an extraordinary assumption. It is not normal to expect it. And lastly, we're dealing with changes in government policy, which they're not always made with the economics of the situation in mind, and the market understands it. So most of these leases were drawn up to accelerate repayment, so that when the lease was terminated, that the landlord wasn't hanging on if they were still there. That's not market value. The window on investment for cap rate is 35 years. That is the window. That's how long you will produce income. And that's really the difference that we're looking at. We're looking at a shorter term. And I hope, I wish I could explain this in simpler terms again. I don't mean to insult anyone at all, but we are dealing with a situation that shouldn't be dealt with by a model. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Okay, we've now heard both items that were on the agenda today, so we've completed this morning's agenda. So I'm going to close this hearing. Thank you both for your submissions and your attendances. You'll hear from us as soon as possible, and we'll make our decisions and send them out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.